there's no use for them. And then all of a sudden, at that point, your stock on hand increases. And then the context is that, so at that point, you had to have a layoff, or you might have to slow manufacturing down, go to 4-day weeks. Like there's so many different factors that affect that. And I think that when it comes to sales and operations planning, it's ultimately whatever you can sell. Like the whole thread to the whole conversation is customer, customer, customer. If the customer doesn't want your stuff, then don't produce it.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. The KPIs for operations manager would differ based on their responsibilities, the size of the org and the industry. The role of ops management could be as diverse as managing tactical roles such as logistics to strategic roles such as procurement. Weak operations management leads to weak sales and operations planning, which might in turn lead to operational disruptions and inferior customer experience. So which are the KPIs that are most relevant for the operations manager to ensure streamlined operations? And which are the KPIs that are critical for operations managers? In today's episode, we invited a panel of cross-functional experts for a live interview on LinkedIn who brings significant expertise to discuss the top KPIs for operations managers. We discussed how the role of operations manager could drive their KPIs. We also discussed several KPIs in different industries such as professional services, manufacturing, and many more. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hello everyone, welcome to today's show. And if you're joining for the first time, this is part of our digital transformation series for which we meet every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, and we pick one topic related to digital transformation. For today, we are going to be talking about KPIs for operations manager. So we are going to have a lot of fun discussing that. Before we do that, we are going to start with everybody's intros. I am going to start with my quick intro. You still don't know me. Sam Gupta, principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm. On that note, I am going to move to my friend Chris for his intro.
Thanks, Sam. Chris Garridini, president and owner of Turnkey Technologies. We're just less than 30 years in existence, implementing Microsoft Dynamics solutions, dealing with KPIs all the time. Some of them are killer performance indicators. Glad to be here.
Just less than 30 years. Thank you so much for being here, Chris. Dave, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. My name is Dave Griffith. I run a company called Kaplan Solutions. We work mostly with manufacturing and industrial companies, and we help them go through digital transformation and other processes that pay for themselves.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Dave. Ryan, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
100%. My name is Ryan Wicklum. I'm the Canadian Territory Manager for ProGlove. We make a wearable scanner that goes to the back of the hand for warehouse distribution and logistics.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Ryan. Paul, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Sure. President, founder of For a Better Business, also around 30 years old. We are implementation-driven process and operations consulting firm. The three characteristics of our firm are immediate buy-in to change. We actually develop that in a day in a company. Implementation and rapid achievement of results.
That is so cool. Thank you so much for being here, Paul. Can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Thanks, Sam, for having me again. My name is Mike Schlagnoff. I work as a manufacturing consultant for Acuity Insurance, which is the 55th largest property and casualty carrier in the United States. And we have about 7,700 manufacturers that pick up the phone and ask me all kinds of questions on how to help them. And a lot of times I says, how do you measure it and what do you use? And they say, we don't have any KPIs.
Yeah, and it's amazing. You guys only talk in the multiples of 30, 55, 60.
Thank you so much for being here, Mike. All right, so now we are going to be talking about a lot of multiples today in terms of KPIs. By the way, if you are in the audience and joining for the first time, make sure you guys post your questions and comments. We typically try to cover them during the show. If we run out of time, our panelists will make sure that you receive your answers. On that note, I am going to start with the first question with Chris. And Chris, when I think of operations manager, and first, obviously, we are going to clarify the roles because the roles are going to vary per industry based on the company size. And in my mind, though the roles and responsibilities, they are going to drive the KPIs in general. That's why I always like to clarify, okay, who is operations manager? Can we define that first? And I'll give you some context because operations manager could mean a lot of different things. Sometimes they do overlap, let's say with supply chain manager. Sometimes now I'm actually hearing a lot of newer terms, which is going to be business manager, pretty much everything. Okay. So Chris, if you could clarify, what operations manager is in your mind and what kind of KPIs that you have seen for those operations manager that you have experience with. Chris, over
Sure.
to you.
It's great. It's an interesting role. And you think about what you use that title, business manager. I actually had someone working for my org that had the business manager role. You're thinking, okay, what's the context? What's the influence? What should you be watching? And as an operations manager, like a general manager, but again, as you look at, and I see the indicators and the metrics, what you need to be watching, they vary. There's different categories, and it's going to vary by industry. So, right, we got this matrix again. What's your industry? What segment? Financial, customer, employee, compliance. There could be, depending on your industry, there could be different categories of KPIs, key performance indicators. And I said killer ones, some killer ones too. But, I'll speak from my industry. So professional services, and if you think about operations on professional services, what's driving you? Well, productivity, right? Operations, it means productivity. Productivity, whether I'm producing, shipping, picking, packing, right? In the services, we're widgets, we're units, we're hours, right? And productivity is performance. And, you look at good productivity, bad productivity. So certainly analytics that are looking at current productivity. If I'm looking current month, what's my productivity production look like against my target production, right? We've always got that. Hey, here's the goal. I've got 50 people times the utilization. This should be my target. Am I performing over? Am I trending? 1 day in, 2 days in, can I forecast trend over, under my target? So I'm looking at productivity. Quality. Quality is a good one too. And so in our industry, you look at, people think about utilization. They think about realization. Meaning, hey, I worked 100 hours. Only 80 of them are good. Well, that's an 80% realization. But in the math of how many hours you worked, your realization is set. So utilization, some percentage of your total effort in. Realization is really that efficiency or that quality attainment of the units that you produced. In the manufacturing world, it'd be like, I made 10, 2 are broke. Okay, you're at 80% quality coming out of that. So quality is a good one. We talked about like that, the quantity is part of it, but then that realization component there. And I think then even on the backside, what do I get paid for? There's a bunch of them. So again, staying on the people performance operations, backlog. What's my backlog? Meaning is I'm looking at utilization. That's a current indicator. So if I have to lean and I want to make sure next week we're not running out of work. So there's two parts of that. One of them is backlog, meaning what are the customer demand? If I look at unfulfilled demand, well, that's a metric. I've got 10,000 hours I haven't delivered. What's my workforce? Maybe they can do 2,000 hours a month. Okay, I got 5,000 hours of 5 months of backlog. So that's another one, backlog. But that's not allocated backlog. So then you drop down and say, well, how much of that backlog is actually allocated? Meaning now we're looking at bookings. Am I allocating work to resources? Boy, that's another big one. How much of it's allocated? Meaning I have all that work. My workers don't know about it. Well, that's a problem because next week I'll still have the same amount of work because nobody got allocated work. So again, those are a few on just, you think about professional services and how do you look at backlog and how much is allocated. And even from a sales team, think about how that backlog and that allocation is important to the sales team. Say, hey, I want to sign a new deal. Where does that fit? And imagine the operations guys. And I think that is just in my little box here I'm talking about, that backlog is going to direct, do I need more resources? So there's a lot of things that come out of the KPIs that person's managing, just in those few that I've mentioned. Do I need more resources? Do I want to tell the customer it's going to take me 6 months to get to you, to start your work? Okay, that's a problem. You'll lose the business. So there may be some optics on what's the lead times on starting work, capacity. Do I need more capacity based on this backlog and bookings? It's important to understand how those few little KPIs can really help you operational delivery, making sure that we're going to keep that backlog, which means that revenue is going to stay constant. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, so there are some very interesting terms, and I was definitely not expecting those. Okay, so good job there. So utilization, realization, and I don't know how many operations managers are going to be familiar with those. So I don't know. Let me see if you want to provide some more colors there in terms
Sure.
of the KPIs. Define the KPIs, how you are going to measure. So I understand, you provided a little context here. What is backlog? What is utilization? What is realization? But how do you sort of measure that in terms
How
of
do you measure
KPIs?
it? And so in the services where people are delivering hours of effort, they're looking at the total effort. So if the universe, they're working a 40-hour week, it's 177 hours a month. Well, there's your baseline. So what's 75% of that? It's 1,560 hours a year. You break it down. So you're coming up with little math. There's little thresholds where you're measuring actual recorded effort against. And I think utilization is applicable in manufacturing. We look at machines. We look at work centers. We're always tracking utilization. How long are they running? What percentage of the time are they actually doing work for the business? People, work centers, I'm sorry, people won't like that. But again, if we look at work centers and people, we're trying to look at how much work time can I get out of those appliances. And I think whether it's operational manufacturing utilization, it's the same thing. If I'm running 1 8-hour shift, there's my benchmark. I'm measuring against that same 8-hour day. What percentage of that 8 hours is that machine running? And in manufacturing, that same utilization is applicable because what if I've got maintenance? Well, I'm losing utilization. What if my worker gets sick? It's the same type of thing. I'm at diminished capacity and so forth. But that's the example of the utilization calculation. Realization, again, comes back on what did I get paid for? So as we deliver to the customer, am I getting paid 100% of what I invoice the customer? So the realization component is a backside calculation based on what's the settlement coming on the customer. So really cash against the revenue. Do I realize 100% of the cash on the revenue that I invoice out the door? That's a realization. It's the same thing in the other areas where we're shipping products. There's not as much dispute. People typically paying product invoices. There's more room for arguments on services and interpretation, I think, and I think that's why there's a difference between utilization and realization anytime. So
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. No, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And Dave, now we know how 30 years sound like, especially as the operations executive and the manager. They don't necessarily have to do any sort of competition, right? When he was talking about 40 hours and then 177 hours, and I'm like, okay, what's going on here? How did he compute that?
He ripped those numbers off really quick, Chris. I will say I was doing some mental calculation over there, those are some very quick utilization numbers. Yeah, you got the iPhone out to make sure that the math that you just said is correct. Sam, if I may, I guess for my industry in manufacturing industrial, they have very kind of similar metrics to what Chris was saying on the professional services side, but I would define an operations or a production manager more narrowly.
Yeah.
So typically, when I work with with an operations or a productions manufacturer, they are in charge of the quite literally the production, right? So we've got raw materials that come in. Someone else typically owns the supply chain portion of that. Depending upon who owns the warehouse, it may or may not be the production manager, but basically from the point of we've got raw materials, we need to go make it into a widget, we need to go put liquids into bottles and then make cases and pallets of things. That is typically the purview of the production manager. And then as long as there isn't quality issues on the back end, typically once we are done making the cases and pallets of things, that is basically where the production manager stops. And not to say they don't care about it anymore, but it is no longer one of the 1,000 fires that they are immediately committed to going to work on. So very narrowly, basically the line, right? So if there's a line that we've got raw materials that come on and the widgets that come off, that is very much the ownership of the production manager. And when I look at that, I would say kind of the number one KPI that they look at is throughput, right? Not all that dissimilar to what Chris was saying, but basically throughput of how many widgets did I make over the course of the day, the week, the month. And then we certainly want to look at that versus what is expected. And to Chris's point, we can get a couple of days in and we know if we're trending upward, if we are going to have a really good month and make more than is necessary, Or many times, a couple of days in, we know if we're going to have a really bad month, then we're not going to make as many as necessary. And depending upon how high mix of the organization it is, sometimes those first couple of days or that first week of the month very much sets the tone of, can we possibly make what our quota looks like. I would say beyond that, downtime is a fairly large metric that almost every production manager I know, one, talks about, and two, complains about. I know very few facilities who say that we do not have a downtime problem. I know a couple that'll tell you they run at 95 or 97% over the course of the year, but most of the time I know many of them who are always looking for 1 or 2 or 20 or 30% of additional uptime because they see that as the biggest loss, as the biggest opportunities to go ahead and look at. And then as I look at KPIs, another one I would look at is kind of expected orders versus shipped orders. And I would go ahead and dig in to that a little bit more and saying typically there are hot orders that maybe we were behind last month, or orders that are to our top tier customers, and we want to go make sure that we are delivering those as close to on time as possible.
Yeah, so some very interesting commentary there. And, we are going to ask everybody's feedback. Today, we are talking about operations manager. I know that some companies, they are going to have just one guy, okay, business manager. He's probably, or she is going to do everything pretty much in the organization. But in some organization, the operations manager and the production manager could be the separate role. Production manager, as you correctly pointed out, Dave, is going to be responsible more for the shop floor. In my experience, the operations manager is going to have slightly broader role. That is going to be your warehouse, depending upon how the organization is set up. That's also supply chain could be tricky. Sometimes supply chain does roll into operation, sometimes it does not. So again, it's the organization, the way it is set up. But one of the comment that I found really interesting in your commentary is related to quota. And I don't know whether you were talking about more of the make to stock organizations, if they have quota for the operations manager, because they probably need to align with the SNOP planning. So maybe clarify that a little bit, where the quota is coming from and which industries you have seen the quota and what were the measurable KPIs there with respect to quota.
Yeah, absolutely. If we want to call it quota, or we want to call it on track, or we want to call it, connecting with the customer demand, there are a bunch of different ways we can go ahead and use that verbiage. But in almost every organization I've been to, there is a number that is kind of we need to ship this, or we have, call it 10,000 orders for this month, and we should reasonably be able to hit 10,000 orders. Many times over the last 3 or 4 years, we've got 20 or 25,000 orders this month, but we will hopefully hit 10 or 12,000 orders and be able to continue to roll that over and have that backlog, as if the end user, as if the customers realize that their additional marginal numbers are in backlog or not are a completely different question. But I don't think that customer satisfaction is going to be, well, it probably should be one of those top KPIs, but it is not particularly one of the ones that I see as worrisome, depending upon how much that we've taken in orders over the course of this month. But typically there is kind of a baseline. We need to make X number of widgets in order to go ahead and stay cash flow positive, in order to go ahead and hit the numbers that we have, revenue, profit, and otherwise, for the week, for the month, for the quarter, for the year. And so as I talk about quota, that is kind of the number that I have. And most organizations that I work with generally have an idea of what that number is, as to if it's per shift, and many times it is per shift, but then that number can easily be extrapolated over an extended period of time as well.
Okay, amazing insights. Thank you so much, Dave, for that. So Ryan, I'm coming over to you. And one of the terms that I typically see often, and I'm going to paint a little picture here overall with respect to operations manager. And some of our common friends, I think a lot of you probably know Dave Chrysler. That's a shout out for him, I guess. He came from very operations management background, and I believe Paul, you also have very operations management background, right? And a lot of operations managers, they call themselves as problem solver. Okay, that's very common in the operations management community because that's what they are doing. But that problem solving aspect in my mind could be very ad hoc way of operating in that manner. It's very hard to sort of set up the KPI. So I don't know the kind of operations manager or roles that you deal with, Ryan. Do
Mhm.
you see similar trend? What kind of KPIs are you seeing in your experience?
Well, I think it used to be like, and I'm going back, and I started manufacturing in 1996, and it used to be that the production manager and the operations manager were in lockstep, and it was primarily offense. And to use a hockey analogy, because I'm Canadian, they're both in the forward line, they're both attacking because they were, like Dave said, they're producing as much as they can to hit quota. I think what's happened is the production manager, his or her job continues to be offense, but I think the operations manager has been, kind of changed and revolved into a risk mitigation position. There's so many external factors. There's logistics vulnerability. There's geopolitical influence. There's all kinds of effects that are external. I think the operations manager now is almost looking to mitigate risk wherever he or she can, because there's so many different angles that they can be attacked. And yes, they are supporting the production manager producing however much they can in the lines, but then they're factoring in, not only the internal factors like inventory on hand and cost of quality, etc., but they're also factoring in external factors, on-time delivery from suppliers, on-time delivery from their logistics teams, etc. And then they're also they're taking, other internal considerations like NPS scores, or they're taking in both internally and externally. Are your people happy? If they're happy, they're going to produce more theoretically, and their utilization rate will be higher. If they're not happy, they're going to be, they're not going to produce as much. And then likewise, from your customer, is your customer happy? Is your on-time delivery okay? Because the last thing you want to do is produce, mountains of widgets, to use the example you guys are using, and then not have a place to put them, not have a customer to sell to. So the operations manager is taking that feedback from sales, marketing, customer success, all these teams, and factoring it into their risk mitigation strategies to support production, support manufacturing, to make sure that everything runs smoothly.
Yeah, very interesting insights here. And NPS is a very interesting example because typically that's going to fall under customer service or customer
Sure.
experience, right? And I don't know who owns that, to be honest. Okay, sometimes it's probably going to be marketing. Sometimes depending upon retail, it's a very different organization in
Well,
general. I mean, sometimes
yeah,
it could.
I think that's the external NPS. I think the internal NPS is just as important. And I think
Yep.
what teams are happiest and why are they happy? Like, do you have a bunch of promoters that are saying, I love working for Dave, I love working for Mike, I love working for Paul, but Chris is a jerk. So, I don't want to work for that guy, right? Why are we, why is that? Let's analyze. Like, and then I think the idea, it used to be that you had to take a lot of effort to measure all KPIs, but with the advent of AI and wearable sensors and all these things, you can have that information like this almost instantaneously. So when you factor in all the input you're getting, because there's data is king now, and that's more of the qualitative aspect. The quantitative aspects are people happy? Are they producing? Are they, what other factors are affecting their performance? So I think the operations manager has, quantitative, qualitative, internal, external, offense, defense. They're looking at all situations, and they're kind of taking all the considerations in and making decisions based upon everything.
Yeah, I actually like internal NPS a lot, to be honest. That can solve a lot of different problems that we have with teams if we had that, right? So thank you so much for bringing that, Ryan.
Yeah.
Paul, I'm coming over to you. So, in your experience, my understanding is that in your past life, you really lived the life of an operations manager or executive. So in your experience, what have you seen in terms of the role and in terms of the KPIs that really work for? Paul, over to you.
So I'm gonna talk about this from a little different perspective. So rather than try to separate between production manager and operations manager, I'm going to look at what what functionally needs to be tracked or people need to be aware of, and I'm thinking of that more from. I mean, we could be here all day on the details, but what are the main elements that would give somebody in that position strings to pull on to further investigate what's going on and do the risk mitigation to say, okay, this is an area where we're weak. We need to be looking at that. And so that's okay. I mean, number one, I would say on-time delivery, because that's the customer. If the customer's not happy, I mean, I had a company call me and say they were at 50% on-time delivery. Well, there's a whole bunch of issues there, but okay, on delivery, throughput, phone quality, scrap and return, absenteeism. Do you have the people to do it? Inventory, downtime, supplier performance. That's kind of the basic set that gives you strings to pull on, and monitoring those things. Get what are what are your vulnerabilities? What's your what has your performance been? And let's you dig into things. So let's OEE. You can have three different areas operating at three different machines operating at the same OEE with wildly different issues. So the real issue is not the OEE itself, but how do you how do you get at all of the underlying issues that are contributing to that performance? So it's more a question of making sure you have top line visibility, top level visibility on the key factors, and the ability to drill down into those where there's some either indication or suspicion that it's not performing, or you're getting an indication that you're going to have a performance.
Yeah, so very interesting commentary there. And I think this is very in line with some of the commentary that you had last time related to composite KPIs. If I remember correctly, that, okay, you need to have the top line, but you need to be able to trace it down in terms of what is affecting. But one of the things that I have heard in the community overall from how many KPIs should you have for a role, and typically the guideline is you cannot have more than 3 or 5. Otherwise, it becomes confusing. Nobody's going to do anything about it. So you should not have more than that. So you still have to have those top line KPIs for a role. So Paul, let's say if I go back to you and ask you, okay, I know that you need to worry about all of these details that are affecting your final KPIs, but which are the top KPIs in your experience? Would this be OEE risk factor that you mentioned, or would it be something else?
So I would always put on time delivery as the number one, because that's the derivative of everything that you're doing. So you need to know that. First run quality along with scrap and returns. So I mean, we'll get to this later, but that's that's a point in which people should stop doing. I mean, that having one-sided KPIs or metrics. So do this. We want to look at throughput, but by the way, we're not looking at scrap and returns. So we got great throughput, and 30% of that's coming back. So you gotta pay attention to one-sided KPIs. People get measured by those, and they will maximize that measure, no problem. So on-time delivery number one, first run quality and scrap and returns. So that gives you your productive capacity, and also employee absenteeism. You don't have the people to do the work. You can't do the work. No, doesn't matter what the machines are capable of. And then there are details on all of those. Absentee, cross training, outtime, overtime. They all trace down to making sure that you're delivering what you need to deliver. You have the productive capacity to do that, and then of course, especially in today's environment, you've got the supplier performance that gets you the material that you want. So I think it's those three areas: what affects the customer, what affects your internal productive capacity, and what are you looking at from the outside that gives you that lets you meet them.
Could not agree more. Thank you so much, Paul, for that. So Mike, I'm coming over to you. And overall, when you look at these different roles, people are talking about operations manager, production manager. We could also have quality manager. Okay. And that's probably going to be a separate role. Okay. And Mike, as a CEO, let's say if you are trying to set up all of these roles and responsibilities and KPIs for people, then you know what, if you are going to have a quality KPI for operations manager, the quality manager is going to say, okay, what am I doing here? what is my KPI if operations manager is actually handling the quality KPI? So I don't know. I mean, see, in your experience, let's say if you have too many roles, especially if they are going to be overlapping. So what have you seen overall in terms of KPIs for the operations manager? Do you agree with these guys in terms of the KPIs that they mentioned? What would be the top KPIs in your experience?
Well, there's a lot of good things that were said 100%. But when my business card actually way back said operations manager, my role was to basically what you just said, managing the quality department and the production department, managing my inventory. Basically, my role was that all of those departments play nice, right? Because, like you just mentioned, the quality guy says, I'm going to go by first time quality, but the operations manager, the production manager says, I can make more widgets, right? So I'm just going to pound widgets out. The sales manager says, well, you're making more than we have orders, and the inventory manager says, I'm buying material that we haven't sold, right? So my role as an operations manager was, okay, first of all, I needed to make sure that all of those people play nice in the sandbox, right? So my KPIs were focusing on, I will not hold Paul to a KPI that's going to mess Dave up. And I don't hold Dave to a KPI that's going to mess Ryan up. So you need to get the overall picture. So I go back to something that Paul, to me, really hit on it on there's a million measurements, and I agree with the one that Paul listed. My background is lean manufacturing. On lean tells you one thing: look at this as through the eye from the customer. I can make all I want to the cost I think is great, and I have the best KPIs. I have 120%, right? But that's not what the customer wants. I'm not going to be around here. So going back to your answer is, I think that KPIs that you really want to do for your operations need to be customer driven. So what is important to my customer? And I agree with what Paul said. On-time delivery. On that alone can have 20 underneath it. That can say, what's my output? What's my throughput? There's a difference between output and throughput. Because, I can output a lot of stuff, but it takes me too long, right? So I'm not making money. I'm putting too much money and I got bottlenecks, right? So driving just by that on-time delivery, or call it customer satisfaction. How many complaint calls do I get, right? If I don't get any, I got to do something right? So let that customer goal, that response from the customer, drive your KPIs through your operations. And then as an operations manager, you need to look at it. Where does engineering fall in that? What is theirs, revision redlining, new product development, yada, yada. And then you go back to your inventory. How fast can they feed my lines, right? So that's why but Paul hit it right on for an operations manager back then. It was really truly, what is the customer going to want and what's the feedback from the customer? And then combining that and using that as a driver to establish the KPIs for my guys, for my production people. So for example, I go back, my on-time delivery is not on time. I give you that as an example. Why did I not deliver the 10 widgets to Dave? Well, because Dave says out of the 10 widgets, eight were good, two were bad. Now I got to go back to my quality manager and says, how do I do? Well, your production manager just keeps running or not checking the parts, right? And the production manager says, well, the inventory manager gave me bad parts from the inventory. The material was already. So that was driving my KPIs. And then you need to put them, it's a domino effect. They all need to be lining up, those KPIs, because if I measure something else than what Dave needs from me, we are not comparing, we're not serving each other. And I have this debate with our customers all the time. They talk about cycle time, and I say cycle time is not that critical. If your takt time, if you don't deliver at the frequency, I can run 50 more parts to this, but the customer doesn't need it. So you are not satisfying the customers. I don't know if that answers your thing, but the simple question to me is, like Lean says, look at your process through the eye of the customer. What do they want? When you want to buy a blue Mercedes and they give you a red Ferrari, you probably be happy, but that's not what you ordered, right?
Yep.
So you're not happy, correct? So does that answer your question?
Yeah, could not agree more. I mean, that's real world, to be honest, okay? And that's what you should be focusing on. But I'm going to give you a scenario based on the conversation that I have had, Mike, okay? And maybe in your experience, you had a lot more clout as the operations manager that these guys were actually listening to you. Typically, that's not the case, okay? So one conversation where these guys were talking about, hey, you have the inventory manager, who should be reporting to whom? Okay, should operations manager report to the inventory manager, or inventory manager to operations manager? So it could be all over the place in terms of who has the real clout, because If you don't have real hierarchy, authority, then people are going to say, you know what, do your job and let me do my job. Okay, you have no one to tell me, what my KPI is supposed to be. So overall, in terms of hierarchy, let's say, how would you structure the organization, Mike, for an operations manager? And should these guys be reporting to operations manager, because he or she is probably handling the overall value stream? In my mind, I think that's what you were referring to.
Yeah. So as an operation manager, I had a boss too, right? Even if I pretend that I don't, but I reported to the CEO. So based on that, here are the the company's strategic goals, right? We want to expand our market, right? So how do I do this? I need to attract more customers. That's not, again, we all have the job to do, but that's not my job. That's sales, right? However, then sales goes out and sells this, and they say, okay, we brought you 10 new customers, so now instead of 100 widgets this week, we need 200. Well, now as the operations guy, I got to go out and say, okay, which of my ducks do I need to align? Okay, I go back to the beginning. I need to have my inventory right, because it doesn't matter how good Sam runs his machines. Oh, I hit it. If you run out of stock by Thursday, you're not making the 200 widgets. So you as the operations guy really need to look at it. How do they all work? On honestly, you said something, having the control, having the authority. And that's, I think, your organization needs to. If I don't have the backing of my CEO or CFO or whoever I report to, that's not going to work. So for me, as an operations guy, you need to have somebody that backs you up and says, okay, you need to develop these 6 guys that are on this screen right now. Sam is inventory, Paul is sales, Dave is this. You as the operations guy need to put them in line, right? And you need to back me on that, Sam. If you don't back me on this, I'm probably gonna go update my resume and send it out, right? So the KPIs of those departments again need to be driven, I think, from the business strategy, which should be on the CEO, CFO, and all of this. Say, hey, we got to go 15% in profits. How do I do this from a sales point? How do I do this from an operational? Because I can grow profits not by making more widgets. I can grow profit by making the right widgets on time at a quality and reducing my cost. So now I'm taking that and put that back to my inventory manager or supply chain manager and say, okay, we need to take 5% or 5 cents off of those parts. Can you go out and shop around? Now, again, we have done that in the 90s and 80s, and we went overseas and we got garbage back, right? So we need to do that right and say, well, we don't have that 5 cents in the product in the raw material. Can we get it out of operation? Now I'm going to go to my quality guides. Where do we scrap parts out? Okay, here we scrap. What can my engineering departments do to improve that process? So I think when you don't have the authority, you need to show to your people how interconnected they all are. And if we don't have, that's why I like what Paul said. If you want to do turnovers or turnarounds in your product or whatever, and delivery is the real true goal, or customer satisfaction, the true goal. We need to agree on that, because if we have different goals, I call it different masters we work for. If yours is, oh, I want to make widgets 1,000,000, but the customer's not happy, then I'm as the operations guy, and if you don't listen to me, then I need to bring the CEO in. And you know what? We need to close the door, get the big stick out, and we got to tweak Sam a little bit, because he has a different KPI, and he dances to a different beat of it. But I think that's really what the operations manager's job is, to make sure that we all go after that same strategy that we as a company develop. And as an operation manager, I get help to funneling all of the strings in the right directions, being there with, you talked about being the problem solver. Honestly, I can probably solve a lot of problems, but I should have people in place and empower them to solve their problem. Does that make sense?
It does. And thank you so much. And I will be updating my resume as well. And I think, Chris is updating his resume. I could see.
I'm out of here, man. I'm going somewhere else, I think. Not yet. Not yet.
All right, Chris. So comments over comments. I'll back off. I know that you are probably going to have a lot.
It's Michael nails some good stuff there, and you think about the customer focused metrics, and they're huge. And again, but even as I'm listening to you guys in operation, production manager, I'm sorry, but there's finance and there's operations. So if we go small, medium, large, I don't care how big your org is. There's finance and there's operations. So operations covers a big space, and so you've got to assume that. And maybe you're small, and maybe you're watching all those things. Maybe you're bigger, and you got an inventory manager, and a production manager, and a sales manager. And in the end of the day, I don't agree with, I can only have 2 or 3 KPIs. you're fired if you can only look at 3 numbers. So rationally, as we look at KPIs, and the real reason here is you're looking for exceptions. It's as simple. If your KPIs don't lift exceptions, get better ones. And again, this is a direct conversation here, but really, what am I looking at? Am I looking at financial KPIs? Hey, they're all green. That's good. Production? I got some yellows in here. Okay, I'm going to go have a conversation. Sales? I got reds. Professional services? I got a backlog problem. So again, I may find that out of 20 KPIs, I got 3 that are red. Great. Maybe I'm only dealing with 3 at a time, but I don't believe that 3 numbers is enough, because I think in operations, if you're really in that role where you're macro, then you need to be able to say, hey, inventory manager, I got a problem. You obviously got delays in receipts. What's this going to impact my production? So again, the smarter guy at the top is looking across all these different KPIs. He can't be as siloed, whereas a production guy is siloed, as Michael articulated that. So I think, just as people rationalize, okay, what are we trying to find? It's exceptions. That really is the rule of the game here, is you're not looking at, oh, that was great. There's nothing to do. You want the actionable work, which is an exception. So you're trying to define those conditions. And what are they? We've talked about a lot of them. I don't have enough backlog. I've got a latency in ship. I'm not hitting my widget production that I need. I've got an inventory delay. These are all critical situations that could impact revenue. They can impact productivity, just a lot of different stuff. But those are the quick comments. But, customer satisfaction. God, that's a big one. Michael said that all the time. Said, doesn't matter what you're doing. Because, again, I think contextually, are the KPIs the right KPIs? And that's a bigger question. Now, great. Operationally, I got to have all those things that I just talked about where I'm looking at exceptions. However, to Michael's perspective, what drives the success and the sustainability of building? You can focus on the wrong things and drive the business into the ground. We didn't realize we've got a customer attrition. Does that mean they're coming in or going out? What about same sales? Are we seeing growth in our customer segment? So again, if you think about customer metrics, this is about looking at the future, right? A lot of these KPIs, and you guys will say, they're old. They're trailing indicators. Hey, how did we do in February? Fantastic. How are we doing right now? What's my backlog next week? And then there's that one that says, hey, guys, in 3 months, we are going to have a problem. We're going to have to fire 3 or 4 people. And I know that everybody's trying to rationalize that, but that's it. That's the magic saucy operations, guys, is he does need to tell the future as well as react to current state situation, in my opinion.
Yeah, very interesting commentary. So I'm going to have just one quick follow-up for you, Chris, and that is going to be finance and operations, right? And typically cost accounting sort of, falls in middle, I guess. And sometimes that could be a very religious conversation as well, whether finance is responsible for that or operations.
Well, I think that the operations guy is going to be seeing profitability. He's going to be seeing some gross margins, because there are indicators on the operations side that'll tell him that operations are going well. Because he doesn't want to wait for the finance guy to say, hey, you really trashed stuff in February. That's 60 days ago. So the finance guy is going to be a little bit later. But I think as you look at the metrics that the guys that are frontline are going to be running, they're going to be current. But like I said, the operations guy is going to have to see what's going on, and he's going to have to see profit, margin, net profit, gross margin, and he's going to be looking at some of that financial data. He's not looking at everything. He's probably may not care about debt to equity ratios and things like that. Then again, he may make sure that, hey, I'm not overbuying inventory. So there are some financial. So again, he's not out of it. But my point is there's so much more financial KPIs that are managed by a CFO than in operations. I think that was it. But there is finance decisions and metrics in his decision making.
Yeah, could not agree more. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. So, Dave, I'm pretty sure you are going to have a lot to say right now.
We could fill an entire hour with comments that I have, Sam, but I will try to find the brevity. To Chris's point, I think basically everyone we talked about, from production to operations to supply chain, in my experience, all of them are going to have profit and loss visibility, right? Like at the point that you are to the manager leadership level, you should have an idea of what your group is doing in relation to people, in relation to quality, in relation to kind of all of that. So from my perspective, everyone is going to have profit and loss visibility. I like Mike and Paul's points about customer focused metrics. Those, in my experience, are also exceptionally hard, right? Like, how do we go measure it? Yes, we in theory could measure on-time delivery, but then we have to assume that our salespeople are giving reasonable delivery expectations. And, Sam doesn't call in and say, hey, I'd like to take, 6 months worth of product. And Dave is saying, yes, you can have that next week, right? I will say anything I need to have in order to get the purchase order, right? So I would say, customer on-time delivery is important. It is just one of those that is much more than just looking at an operations or a production thing it is. You have to make sure everything within your organization is right, including the sales force and other promises, and we've got reasonable expectations of what everything looks like. I would also say that when it comes to customer success, you will hear kind of that very top group of customers that absolutely love what you're doing. You're going to hear that very bottom of customers. I think Mike made the point of how many calls are we going to get of people saying good and or bad things. We're gonna hear some good stuff. We're gonna hear some bad stuff, but we've probably got a middle, I don't know, 40 to 60% of you've been late 6 times in a row, and I'm just gonna stop ordering and I'm gonna go find someone else to go buy my widget from. In my experience, organizations that are focused on the customer, if they're going to go spend the time and the money, if they're going to go have conversations with their customers to follow up how projects and how they like everything, and make sure to continue to hit those people time and time again, those are very customer focused organizations, and that is certainly the direction that everyone should go. As to if most people do invest the time and money to do that is kind of a different question. And then to Ryan's point, making sure that the folks working for you are happy. I love that. I love that, Ryan. I also think that's kind of a difficult metric in order to be able to go hit, because you've got the people who will say they love you, but like Chris is updating the resume after we heard some things that we didn't particularly like. But employee happiness, kind of longevity of how long people are working at the organization, and then what sort of turnover looks like, all exceptionally good metrics.
Yeah, and Dave, you are never going to get a call from me for 6 months worth of order unless that is going to be for free, okay? But related to your comment on P&L, right? P&L could mean a lot of different things.
Yep.
For a finance guy, the P&L could be very different than your operations guy. Sometimes, I have seen scenarios where maybe completely okay from finance perspective, but then you don't really have the product level profitability or the things that operations guys are going to care for. So I don't know if you're going to have any sort of build-up follow-up there based on my comment.
Yeah, I would say that profit and loss is, I guess, in my experience, people should have an idea of how much projects cost. People should have an idea, especially at this level, as to hopefully they've got an idea of what it takes to go ahead and make our widgets. Although I've certainly worked with organizations that, like, the CFO and maybe no one else had any idea of what it costs to make one of these widgets, which is never a really good sign. But generally speaking, by the time you get to management leadership, people should have an idea of what everything costs. And that way, if we are having issues, and when I look at it, I especially think of the quality that we've talked about a bunch, right? Like if we're having a bunch of quality issues, at some point, any of the leadership that we talked about should say, hey, let's go shut it down. Let's go figure out why we're having 20 or 40 or 60% reject rates, because especially if we can't take it through a second pass to try to go fix any of these problems, this is becoming exceptionally expensive very quickly, and it doesn't make sense to run the line, because while we're running the line and throughputing and in theory creating product, we are going to run at a net loss worse than if we just had the entire crew stand here for a couple of hours as we do some root cause analysis.
Yeah, could not agree more. Thank you so much, Dave, for that. So Ryan, I'm coming over to you, and I'm pretty sure you are going to have a lot of comments as well. So I'll hold on my questions, I guess.
Yeah, I think all fantastic points. It's honestly like I've learned a lot just being here and listening, kind of sponging up what everybody's talking about. I think it's very important, and I think a lot of successful companies that I've seen, they have people managing and people owning KPIs that support contextualized KPIs. And I'll say, take inventory on hand, for example. The inventory manager owns inventory on hand, and his job or her job is to determine how much inventory we have in the building, okay, or other buildings or within the company. Now, the context is provided by finance, saying, okay, listen, inventory on hand is 2 million, but the cost of inventory is actually 5 million. Other various factors. So there's context provided by finance. Same with like the example that Mike gave about cycle time versus tack time. Cycle time is easy. Production manager owns that. Pound, make a bunch of widgets. Tack time is the context is provided by sales operations planning, right? Or the quality department has context in that too. So I think it's important that people understand that people own KPIs, but the context comes from around that KPI to kind of give an almost like a financial indicator or call it an Uber planning performance indicator, right? You can't just manage inventory on hand and say, okay, great, 2 million done. Well, that's nothing. There's no context, right? It's much like if you look at a dashboard and you see, okay, our cycle time is this, and the fancy dashboard has a gauge or a dial. Well, that's great, but there's number one, there's bias involved because people that program the dashboard. Number two, there's no context. So I think it's very important that people understand that it's great to manage a number or a group of numbers, but the context comes from around that department.
Yeah, so very interesting. So I'm going to have just one follow-up comment there, and that is going to be sales and operations planning and the role, right? So where does that fit in? Does that overlap with the operations manager in your experience?
Well, I think it goes back to the risk mitigation, right, that I mentioned previously at the start. If sales doesn't sell enough to support full blown like the quota that Dave mentioned earlier on, then what's the point of hitting quota? All you're doing is making excess, right? And if you have no plan to sell that excess,
Yeah.
if you like Chris mentioned about it's all well and good, but this is what we did in February. February doesn't matter anymore. It matters what's coming in July. In July, we've planned out. We forecast a glut of demand. Great, we need to support that. Or in August, there's going to be a dearth of demand. We need to hold back now, not produce as much now, and put a bunch of items in the stock that might go bad or there's no use for them. And then all of a sudden, at that point, your stock on hand increases, and then the context is that you don't need them. So at that point, you have to have a layoff, or you might have to slow manufacturing down, go to 4-day weeks. Like there's so many different factors that affect that. And I think that when it comes to sales and operations planning, it's ultimately whatever you can sell. Like the whole thread to the whole conversation is customer, customer, customer. If the customer doesn't want your stuff, then don't produce it.
Could not agree more. Thanks, Ryan. Great insights. So, Paul, coming over to you, and I'm pretty sure you are going to have a lot of comments as well. So, comments over comments, Paul.
I'll just cite an instance where we had a company that was they were at 50% on time delivery. Okay, so this is a company in disarray, incredible disarray, and so if you looked at organizationally, after discussions with the CEO and what I had seen, he actually, as a transition move, made all of the management report to the person who is in charge of customer service. Everybody. So it was CEO, customer service, and everybody else reporting to that position because all the decisions had to be made. Who's the customer? What are we able to ship to them? And that set of decisions, everything else had to be subservient to that. Now that was a transition to get back. So we got them to 97% on time and 2% of the inventory, and then they reverted to a more standard position, but or reporting structure. But all of that depends. Who's responsible for what piece depends very much on your situation as a company, not just what your performance is. What's your talent pool? Who has the ability to look at that and do that? And even more than that, who will do that? Not just, yes, this person has the capability, but they won't actually do it. There's a great book called Five Frogs on a Log that goes through that in a mergers and acquisition sense. That it's not what people are capable. It's what will they actually do, and that plays an important part in also how things are structured inside the company, especially when you're talking about mid-market companies. When you're talking about large enterprises, there's a whole different set of criteria there. But in a mid-market enterprise, there can be a lot of variation, which doesn't necessarily follow the standard rules of engagement, but it's necessary in order to take advantage of the capabilities that you have in-house. The other piece we couldn't meet the schedule that we set up. We had to break setups because we were short of material, because the allocation was made, but the inventory number was wrong. I mean, you chase a lot of pieces there, but the interrupts are also very instructive if you use them. Use them as information to say what happened to cause that interrupt. Let's run that to ground, and that gives us a basis for action, kind of regardless of what the KPI is, because those are the things that will eventually show up in KPIs.
Okay, amazing insight there. Thank you so much, Paul. So, Mike, we have just 2 minutes in the show, and any comments over comments, and you might want to address this question as well from.
Well, I go back to something at the last round. It's one of the. So if you only measure 3 KPI, I don't need you go somewhere else. I think it was Edward Deming that said if you don't measure it, you can't improve it, right? So all those KPIs that you need to put in there, you know what, even if you have a KPI that's green all the time, you want to keep looking at it, but focus on the red ones. And then, once they turn orange, go to the green, to the orange ones, turn them green. I think measuring and understanding how I collect my data, have clean data. Everybody needs to understand how you measure the data, and then analyze your data. There was some talk, I don't know who mentioned it before, the programmer for the dashboard could have influenced how that data gets played out. But I think when you create your KPIs, you need to consider this: how I pull my data, how do I verify my data, how do I look my data. But I rather measure more things, and after 6 months or a year, as this never turns red, I can take my eye off of that. But I rather have it up there because there is so much that happens, and we just went through this in the last years, right? Who would have ever thought that the supply chain becomes the number one topic at the news, right? Nobody would have thought about that. So if you didn't measure it, you didn't even know your supply chain just crumbled, right? So I believe what Chris said, put more KPI out there, keep your eyes on it. And like Deming said, if you don't measure it, you can't improve it. Even if you're green, I think Paul mentioned just now, they got them to 97%. Your goal should be 100%, right? Again, going from 50% to 97% to 97%, everybody can get a pat on the back, but measure it.
Okay, amazing insight there. Thank you so much, Mike, for that. So we can take just one word closing advice probably from everybody. Just one word, Chris.
Mike's point's right. Check your math. If it's green all the time, go check the math. It may be broken. Next.
Love it. Thank you so much, Chris. Dave, one word, please.
Measure what you guys are doing internally, and then make sure your customers continue to be happy.
Love it. Thank you so much, Ryan. On mute right now. Sorry, Ryan.
Sorry, I take context. I keep going back to it.
Okay, amazing. Love it. Thank you so much, Ryan. Paul, still have Paul?
One word.
Yep.
Yeah. One word. Think.
Advice. Love it. Awesome. Thank you so much. Mike.
Look at your KPIs. Make it a habit.
Love it. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate you all. And that's it for today. If you joined for the first time, this was part of our digital transformation series, for which we meet every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you guys are going to. Next week, we are going to come back with another topic. On that note, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in.
Again. You guys take care.
Great seeing all of you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Good discussion.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Chris Garadini, head over to turnkeytech.com. It's turnkeytech.com. If you want to learn more about Paul Briegel, head over to 4abetterbusiness.com. It's 4abetterbusiness.com. If you want to learn more about Ryan Wicklum, head over to proglove.com. It's progrove.com. If you want to learn more about Mike Slagenhofer, head over to acuity.com. It's acuity.com. If you want to learn more about Dave Griffith, head over to dave-griffith.com. It's dave-griffith.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.